Nowadays, battles at sea are fought mostly from insane distances. We have smart missiles capable of hitting an enemy vessel having been fired from hundreds of miles away. Aircraft can soar to engage shipping from insane heights, and ships engaging one another with gunfire seems like a quaint notion of the distant past. But what a past it was. There was once a time where the only way to engage the enemy was to do so from nearly point-blank range, and Iron Men in ships of all shapes and sizes went to war in some of the most punishing battles in history. These stories are remarkable. They deserve their own dedicated videos, but today I thought we could turn back the history books to get an overview of some of the most insane, gripping naval battles from history. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs, and these are 5 of the most fascinating battles ever fought at sea. You know, we rarely, if ever, talk about the ancients on this channel, but some of the fiercest wars ever fought and resolved at sea in truly brutal fashion happened back then. Let's go back to the year 480 BCE, nearly 2,500 years ago. The Persian fleet was a formidable force of over 1,000 ships, and it loomed large on the horizon, their massive presence casting a shadow over the narrow strait of Salamis. These ships, known as triremes, were the backbone of both the Persian and the Greek fleets. The trireme was a marvel of ancient naval engineering, a warship that was long, narrow, and built mainly for speed and agility. Measuring around 120 feet, or 36 meters in length, triremes were powered by 3 rows of oars on each side, manned by up to 170 rowers. The oarsmen, arranged in a tiered formation, acted as the engine of the vessel, propelling them with brute force forward at impressive speeds. The Persians had the numbers, but the Greeks had something more crucial: superior tactics and a commander who understood the limitations of his enemy's ships. Themistocles, the Athenian general, recognized that the Persians' vast fleet was better suited to the open sea, but in the confined waters of Salamis, their size would be their downfall. The Persian triremes were heavily laden, designed to carry large contingents of troops for boarding actions, which made them slower and less maneuverable in narrow waters. The Greek triremes, by contrast, were built for agility. Their lighter construction and their lower displacement allowed them to turn more quickly and exploit the Persians' lack of maneuverability. The Greeks also made use of a reinforced bronze ram affixed to the prow of their ships, designed specifically to puncture the hulls of enemy vessels. They used a tactic known as diekplis. This involved rowing at full speed between the gaps in the enemy line, then turning hard to ram the side of the opponent's ship. It was a technique that required precision and coordination, but these were qualities that the Greek sailors and their ships had in abundance. As dawn broke that day, the Greek triremes surged forwards, their oars churning the water as they raced towards the enemy. The Persians, trapped in the narrow strait, struggled to maneuver their cumbersome vessels in response. Themistocles' plan was working. The smaller, nimbler Greek ships weaved through the Persian line with their bronze rams splintering hulls and sending enemy ships to the bottom of the sea. The battle was fierce, but the Greeks fought with the desperation of men defending their homes and families. By the end of the day, the once mighty Persian fleet was in ruins, their ships wrecked or captured, their crews either drowned or taken prisoner. Around 40 Greek ships were lost, but it's thought that 300 Persian ships were sunk, a resounding defeat for the mighty power. The Battle of Salamis was more than just a military victory, it was a triumph of strategy. The Greek trireme, with its speed and agility, and that deadly bronze ram, had proven itself superior to those larger, more cumbersome Persian ships. The battle was a turning point in the long-running Greco-Persian wars, one that would echo through history. Greek design and tactical thinking had combined to win a victory, one of the ancient world's most epic naval battles. Fast forward now to November 1st, 1914, and the world had changed beyond recognition. The age of sail had long given way to the age of steam, and with it came ships of steel, powered by coal and armed with guns, capable of hurling shells over vast distances. The Battle of Coronel, fought off the coast of Chile, was a stark reminder of just how far naval warfare had advanced and how deadly it had become. The German East Asia Squadron, under the command of Vice Admiral Maximilian von Spee, was a formidable force. It comprised the armoured cruisers SMS Scharnhorst and SMS Gneisenau, supported by the light cruisers SMS Nürnberg, SMS Leipzig, and SMS Dresden. Now, these ships were the epitome of early 20th century warship design, with sleek steel hulls, powerful steam turbines, and hefty main armaments. The Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau were particularly impressive, each ship displacing around 12,000 tons and armed with 8.3-inch or 210mm main guns capable of firing large shells that could penetrate the armour of almost any ship afloat in that remote theatre of operations. They weren't as big or well protected as battleships, but these fast vessels were a huge thorn in the Allied powers' side because they were capable of hitting unprotected convoys of warships and merchant ships alike before steaming away at breakneck speed. The answering British squadron, led by Rear Admiral Sir Christopher Craddock, was outgunned and outclassed. The force consisted of the aging armoured cruisers HMS Good Hope and the HMS Monmouth, along with the modern light cruiser HMS Glasgow and the armed merchant ship HMS Otranto. The Good Hope and Monmouth were essentially relics of an earlier era, but they, with 234mm 9.2-inch guns, could still pack a punch. As the two squadrons converged off the coast of Chile, it quickly became apparent that the British were at a severe disadvantage. The German ships, faster and better armed, used their superior speed to dictate the terms of the engagement from the start. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the German cruisers opened fire. The British ships, unable to close the distance, were subjected to a withering barrage. The Good Hope and the Monmouth were soon ablaze, their crews fighting valiantly, but in vain. The Germans, using their superior range and firepower, methodically pounded the British ships with a hail of shell fire that left them shattered. By the end of the battle, both the Good Hope and the Monmouth had been sunk, with all hands lost. 3 German seamen were wounded, but in return, 1,660 British men were lost to the deep. The Battle of Coronel was a disaster for the Royal Navy, the first time in over a century that a British squadron had been defeated so soundly in battle. Clearly, the German squadron's technical superiority and deadly gunnery had won them the day, but the Battle of Coronel was more than just a sound military defeat. For the Royal Navy, it was a wake-up call. Outraged, the Admiralty sent a powerful squadron of modern battle cruisers to hunt down von Spee's force without mercy, and in a complete turnaround, the German squadron was in turn sunk in a horrendous engagement that left nearly 2,000 Germans dead, and those modern German cruisers at the bottom of the ocean. The Age of Steel and Steam boasted some pretty legendary engagements, but some of the largest naval battles in history actually happened hundreds of years before. One 16th century battle saw an utterly staggering 20 to 30,000 men killed on a single day. The year was 1571, and the Ottoman Empire was at the height of its power. The Christian states of Europe, threatened by the relentless Ottoman advance, formed a holy league, determined to halt the Muslim fleet in its tracks. The stage was set for the Battle of Lepanto, one of the largest naval battles in history, and a confrontation that would become legend. The ships that clashed at Lepanto were galleys, long, narrow vessels primarily powered by oars. The Ottoman fleet, led by Ali Pasha, was the most formidable naval force in the Mediterranean, comprising over 200 galleys and 60 galiots, smaller but highly manoeuvrable vessels. These ships were the backbone of the Ottoman Navy, designed for speed and agility. The galleys were typically about 150 feet or 36 metres long and 20 feet wide, with a shallow draft that allowed them to navigate coastal waters and shallow harbours. Each galley was equipped with a single large sail for some long-distance travel, but in battle, the oars provided the primary means of propulsion, allowing the ships to manoeuvre in quickly for close-quarters combat. The Christian fleet, under the command of Don John of Austria, was a patchwork of ships from Spain, Venice, and the Papal States. It included over 200 galleys and 100 smaller vessels, including galleasses, which were heavily armed and armoured galleys that played a crucial role in the battle. The Christian galleys were similar in design to their Ottoman counterparts, but had a crucial advantage: their firepower. Each galley was armed with a variety of cannons, including large naval guns mounted on the bow, designed to deliver a devastating broadside at close range. As the two fleets met in the Gulf of Patras, near the town of Lepanto, the air was thick with tension. The battle began with an exchange of cannon fire, the roar of the guns echoing across the water. The Christian galleys, using their superior firepower, attempted to break the Ottoman line, and the Ottomans, relying on their speed and manoeuvrability, tried to outflank the Christian fleet and launch boarding actions. For hours, the battle raged, the sea literally turning red with blood as men fought hand-to-hand on the decks of the ships. These ships were designed for close quarters combat with their low freeboard, allowing the crews to board enemy vessels easily. The fighting was brutal, with swords, pikes, and early muskets used to deadly effect. The cannons roared, and the thunder of the oars beating the water echoed across the Gulf. The Christian fleet, despite being outnumbered, held its ground, thanks in part to their superior firepower and the daring of their commander, Don John. In the end, it was the Christians who prevailed. The Ottoman fleet was decimated, with over 150 ships captured or sunk, and more than 20,000 men killed or captured. The Battle of Lepanto was a turning point in the struggle between the Christian and Muslim worlds. It was a victory that ended the Ottoman Empire's naval dominance in the Mediterranean for the time, and marked the beginning of the empire's slow and gradual decline. Some battles are not so close-cut, and sometimes the defeat can be so devastating, so brutal and unexpected that it changes the course of history forever. The Battle of Tsushima, fought in May 1905 between the Imperial Russian Navy and the Imperial Japanese Navy, was a perfect example of this. It was a battle that would not only decide the fate of the two empires, but would also signal the arrival of Japan as a major naval power. The Russian fleet, under the command of Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky, was an impressive sight. It consisted of the Baltic Fleet, which had travelled over 18,000 nautical miles to reach the waters off the coast of Japan. That's a story for another day, because it was absolutely not smooth sailing. The fleet included battleships like the Knyaz Suvorov, the Borodino, and the Orel, massive vessels with thick steel armour and powerful guns. These battleships were the pride of the Russian Navy, each displacing over 13,000 tons and armed with four 12-inch or 305mm main guns capable of hurling shells over 10 miles with devastating effect. The Russian battleships were accompanied by cruisers, destroyers, and auxiliary ships, forming a formidable force. The Japanese fleet, commanded by Admiral Togo Hayachiro, was smaller but far more modern. It included 4 battleships, led by the Mikasa, a state-of-the-art vessel that was the flagship of the Japanese fleet. Mikasa, built in Britain, was one of the most advanced warships of her time, with a displacement of 15,000 tons, very thick steel armour, and 4 12-inch guns in turrets. The Japanese fleet also included 8 armoured cruisers, destroyers, torpedo boats, all of which were designed for speed, manoeuvrability, and devastating torpedo attacks. The stage was set for a naval clash that would change the course of history. As the two fleets met in the Tsushima Strait, Admiral Togo executed a daring manoeuvre known as crossing the T, a tactic that allowed his ships to bring all their guns to bear on the advancing Russian fleet, while the Russians could only respond with their forward-facing guns. The Japanese ships, using their speed and their firepower, opened fire on the Russian fleet, and the battle quickly turned into a slaughter. The Russian ships, hampered by their slower speeds and their outdated designs, were unable to maneuver effectively, and they were pounded by the accurate Japanese gunfire. The Knyaz Suvorov, the Russian flagship, was hit repeatedly, its thick armour unable to withstand the barrage of shells. One by one, the Russian battleships were sunk or disabled, the crew struggling to keep up with their Japanese enemies. The Japanese ships, faster and more agile, exploited every weakness in the Russian formation, eventually using torpedoes to devastating effect. By the end of the battle, the Russian fleet was in ruins. 21 Russian ships were sunk, including 7 battleships, and more than 5,000 Russian sailors were killed. The Japanese, by contrast, lost only 3 torpedo boats and suffered just over 100 casualties. The Battle of Tsushima was a stunning victory for Japan and a humiliating defeat for Russia. It was the first time in history that an Asian power had defeated a European power in a major naval battle. Japan had marked itself out as a major player on the world stage. Soon enough, though, even the impressive steel-hulled battleships of the 1900s were rendered obsolete by one of the 20th century's most earth-shattering innovations, the airplane. The Coral Sea, May 1942. The world was at war, and the aircraft carrier had become the new queen of the seas. The Battle of the Coral Sea, fought between the United States Navy and the Imperial Japanese Navy, was the first major naval battle in history where the opposing ships never saw each other. Instead, it was a battle fought entirely by aircraft, which was a testament to how far naval warfare had come since the days of Salamis and Lepanto. The Japanese fleet, commanded by Admiral Shigeyoshi Inoue, was on a mission to capture Port Moresby in New Guinea, a strategic point that would allow them to threaten Australia and dominate the South Pacific. The fleet included 2 fleet carriers, Shokaku and Zuikaku, along with the light carrier Shoho and the usual escort of destroyers and cruisers. The Shokaku and Zuikaku were among the most advanced carriers in the world, each displacing around 25,000 tons and capable of carrying more than 70 aircraft each. These carriers were the heart of the Japanese fleet, and their air groups comprised dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighter planes that could strike at enemy ships from hundreds of miles away. The American fleet, under the command of Admiral Frank J. Fletcher, was determined to stop the Japanese advance. The fleet included 2 carriers, USS Lexington and USS Yorktown, along with the usual assortment of cruisers and destroyers. The Lexington, affectionately known as Lady Lex, was one of the largest aircraft carriers in the world, with a displacement of over 36,000 tons and a complement of more than 90 aircraft. The Yorktown was a slightly smaller, but equally formidable ship with a displacement of 25,000 tons and a similarly sized air group. These carriers were supported by a variety of cruisers and destroyers, all of which were armed with anti-aircraft guns designed to protect the carriers from enemy aircraft. As the 2 fleets converged in the Coral Sea, both sides launched their aircraft in a desperate bid to find and destroy the enemy's carriers. The first major engagement occurred on May 7th, when American aircraft from the Yorktown and Lexington located and attacked the Japanese light carrier Shoho. In a matter of minutes, the Shoho was hit by more than a dozen bombs and torpedoes, turning her into a blazing inferno before she sank. The American pilots, exhilarated by their success, radioed back the now famous message, "Scratch one, flat top." The following day, the main fleets clashed in a fierce aerial battle. Japanese aircraft from Shikaku and Zuikaku managed to find and attack the Lexington and the Yorktown. The Lexington was hit by 2 torpedoes and several bombs, causing severe damage. Despite the best efforts of her crew, the damage proved too great, and Lady Lex was eventually abandoned and scuttled. The Yorktown, though damaged, managed to escape and would fight another day. The Battle of the Coral Sea was a tactical victory for the Japanese because they managed to sink the Lexington and damage the Yorktown. But it was a strategic victory for the Allies, as the Japanese were forced to abandon their plans for Port Moresby. The battle also marked the first time that a major Japanese advance had been checked during the war, which boosted Allied morale and set the stage for the epic Battle of Midway, which would follow just a month later. This battle was also a turning point in naval history because it marked the end of the era of the battleship and the dawn of the era of the aircraft carrier. The battle demonstrated the power of air superiority and the importance of aircraft carriers in modern naval combat. Now, the most powerful ships in the world could be vulnerable to aerial attack. It was a lesson that would shape naval strategy for the rest of the war and beyond. Battles at sea, like the ones we talked about today, remind us that the same ingenuity that can build a vast and impressive ship can also design a weapon that can kill it in seconds. The ocean remains a place of profound beauty, but also brutality, where history has been shaped by the forces of creation and human destruction alike. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we get new videos out weekly. If you want to support my work and get really cool perks like behind the scenes and early access, please visit my Patreon in the link in the description below, or sign up as a YouTube member. Come and join the crew. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again next time.